Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're jumping into an exciting what if Naruto is a medical prodigy. Part 2. If you enjoy this what if and want to see part 3, make sure to comment down below. Before we begin, don't forget to support the channel for more awesome content. Leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, make sure to check out the description and my playlist for more amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Chapter 4. Through Genin Exam and D Ranks. Training Ground 9 Kahona Menma's POV. Training Ground 9 was traditional for the Genin Team 9 to practice in. It was a basic training field surrounded by dense forests and an open field in the center that featured as the training ground. It was nearing 6:40 in the morning when Yakumo, Lee, and Naruto arrived at the training ground. They had each come a bit early to plan for the true Genin test. Naruto started off the planning alright, I have known Sensei for quite a while. She is an all-round fighter who uses primarily stealth attacks to kill or injure her opponents. She has the ability to summon snakes to aid her in battle. She is also one of the few poison specialists in the village besides myself. Both Yakumo and Lee nodded at the information, and Yakumo commented, I suggest with the information we have on Sensei is to use a distraction. Lee will distract Sensei while I layer illusions while Menma finishes her off. Menma nodded at the sound plan, it probably would not work against a like Anko, but it was the best they had. Lee raised his fist to the sky and shouted Yosh. With the power of youth there is no way we cannot pass this test. Yakumo and Menma sweat dropped, it was clear that he had already been corrupted from Guy. Suddenly he felt a chill as if someone was walking on his grave. He quickly knocked back his teammates and deflected the incoming kunai with a scalpel. Scowling a bit he sighed and spoke out loud to the woods, Oi, Sensei, do you have to throw kunai every time we get together? Anko shushed in front of the group, grinning widely. Well Gaki, it's good to see you haven't lost your touch in the time we have been away from each other. If you had I would have to beat those skills back into you. Menma shivered a bit knowing she was being completely serious. What is our test today, Sensei? Anko grew serious and began to explain the test I was going to do for you. However, it is tradition for the 2 rookies of the year and the dead last take the bell test. Anko took out 2 bells and attached them to her waist. The purpose of this test is to take these bells from me. The person who does not have any part of a bell will return to the academy. All 3 students tensed, it went without saying that there were only 2 bells. Anko grinned evilly at them. You have until noon, which is in 3 hours, you may begin. All 3 students jumped into the surrounding forest. Anko looked around the forest and smirked, she may not be a censor like Kakashi, but. The green garden snake was staring at Menma from behind. The black snake was staring at Yakumo. The blue snake stared at Lee from the bushes. They can't escape her snakes. Training Ground 9 surrounding forest Menma POV 3 hours until test is over. He knew there has to be some sort of trick to this test. He had reviewed the previous team rosters from the Hokage's personal library. There had never been a 3-member team unless it was for a double apprenticeship, which rarely ever happens. He thought back to Anko's words any part of a bell, and he smirked, clever Sensei but not clever enough. He jumped through the forest searching for his teammates. Training Ground 9 open field Lee POV 2.45 hours until test is over. I jumped into the field to confront our Sensei. I will not fail Guy Sensei and will get a bell, or I will do 500 laps around Konoha with my hands. I arrived at the field and took my stance in front of Anko Sensei and smiled widely. Greetings Sensei, I will take one of those bells now. Anko sweat dropped at his loud entrance. You're not very smart, are you Gaki? Not answering, Lee dashed at his sensei at high speeds and jumped in the air in a spinning kick leaf whirlwind. Anko easily dodged the kick and kicked Lee's side as he passed, breaking his spin and tossing him away. Lee jumped up and ran at Anko and was about to punch her when she was replaced by a log. Kawamari. He thought as he looked around for his sensei. However, as soon as he turned around the log poofed and was replaced by Anko, who kicked him in the back into the woods. She quietly chuckled to herself, she never thought that any idiot would confuse Kawamari for Henge. In another dimension Naruto sneezed. She looked down at a snake in the grass and it whispered information to her. Her grin widened, she knew her favorite Gaki would understand the test. Now they just had to get a bell from her. Training Ground 9. Surrounding forest Menma POV 2 hours till test is over. He had quickly found Yakumo hiding near his location and told her his theory about the test. She had believed him and they quickly went to find Lee. They found him getting his ass kicked by Anko Sensei. It was a good thing that she was going easy on him. Last time he made a stupid mistake like she had copied Kakashi's 100 Years of Pain with a kunai and explosive tags. They quickly gathered Lee and explained the situation to him. He was quick to agree that they needed to work together and they started to hash out a plan. Menma brought out 2 ceiling tags and handed them to his teammates. We don't have time to make you too immune to my poisons, so wear those on your chest, they will filter out the air and prevent poison from entering your lungs. Yakumo took one of the tags and looked at Menma's gas mask. Why do you wear that if you have these tags and when did you learn sealing? Menma didn't even look sheepish as he stated seriously. It looks more badass than wearing a sealing tag. Plus those tags do not last forever, these will last around 2 hours max. I learned some sealing from Anko-sensei, a lie, but they didn't need to know that. These anti-poison seals are mandatory for any poison user to carry. They both nodded and they started their plan. Training Ground 9. Open field Anko's POV 1 hour until test is over. Anko was standing in the center of the field when 3 syringes flew from the surrounding forest. She quickly dodged them, but noticed 3 explosive notes wrapped around them. Shit, she cursed as they exploded. As the smoke cleared, a broken log was on the ground. Menma rushed out into the field with his chakra scalpels activated and rushed at the now revealed Anko in a taijutsu match. He thrust a glowing palm at Anko as she dodged the thrust and retaliated with a high kick to the head. He ducked backwards beneath the kick and sprang up from the ground in a backwards cartwheel, kicking Anko in the chin in the process. As he landed on his feet, he jabbed at Anko's exposed throat with his scalpel. However, before he could get near her throat, she kneed him in the stomach, then kicked him away from her. She quickly spun around and backhanded Lee, who was about to punch her in the back. Soon she was countering a barrage of taijutsu from Lee and Menma. She smirked a bit and caught both Lee and Menma's fists and spun around, throwing them in opposite directions. Not bad, but you're 100 years too early to beat me in close combat. As Menma and Lee were falling, their pain grimaces turned into smirks as a small smoke bomb near Anko's feet exploded. The field suddenly got filled with purple smoke. Anko, who was in the middle of the blast, started coughing a bit and felt her limbs starting to become heavier. As she was coughing, that damn gaki made a paralyzing poison that can affect me. She quickly went through hand signs and used a wind to push the poison away from her. As soon as she could see again, Menma was in front of her, a syringe on each finger covered in chakra scalpels. She took out a kunai and channeled chakra into it to deflect the jabs and slashes of Menma's needles. She had to duck as Lee proceeded to do another leaf whirlwind at her back and jumped out of the way as Menma slashed at her with his scalpels. Suddenly she felt a shift in the air as she fluxed her chakra and her 2 students disappeared and Lee's kick was about to connect to her face while Menma was nowhere to be seen. She bent down unnaturally to dodge Lee's kick and caught a small dart in her hand that was about to enter her neck from behind. Menma emerged from the woods again, his gas mask on his face and a blowpipe sticking out of a section of the mouthpiece that was previously hidden behind his gas mask. Anko grinned at her 2 students. Not bad guys, but not enough to take me down. Lee was about to charge her again when she pointed her arm at him and yelled Senjutsu, and snakes wrapped around Lee and she dragged him to crash him into Menma, who was charging at her from behind. She chuckled a bit before her eyes widened, her perception had switched, it felt as if she was doing a handstand and looking up at the sky. She smirked a bit, what a nice thing. She closed her eyes and with sound deflected and blocked the attacks from her 2 students as she continued to flux her chakra to get rid of them. Suddenly she opened her eyes as she dispelled and dodged the attacks of her students before kicking them away from her. She smirked a bit as she saw them struggling to get up. What she was not prepared for was when Naruto suddenly shouted, "Now!" In the forest, Yakumo had just finished a painting of Anko, locked a bind of steel beams and injected chakra into the painting. In the middle of the field, Anko suddenly froze as she saw steel beams wrapped around her body. Both Menma and Lee rushed to the bells. Anko, unable to free herself from the real illusion, could not react as both bells were taken from her. She smirked as all 3 of her students stood in front of her, all smiling while Lee and Menma had the bells. She looked at all 3 of her students. Alright you gals, Lee and Menma have a bell, so it looks like Yakumo is going back to the academy. Menma smirked a bit and used his chakra scalpel to cut his bell in half and gave it to Yakumo. You never said we could not split the bell, sensei. And besides, this test is not about getting the bells but working together. Anko started laughing loudly, hahaha. I can't wait to see Kakashi's face when he learns that my students passed his precious bell test. You were right, Menma, the point of this test was teamwork. I am proud of all of you, my cute little students. But for now I need to report the results to the Hokage. Why don't you all treat yourself to something nice for lunch while I do that? She poofed away in a shunshin. All 3 genin members grinned at each other. Lee was shouting about youth and how he made Guy sensei proud. Yakumo was glowing with happiness that she proved her old sensei Kurenai wrong and became a genin. Menma smirked to himself as he took off his gas mask, he was now a genin 1 year before his sister. He could not wait to finally show his former parents what he could do by defeating his sister. Menma turned to his teammates and smiled a bit. Why don't we go out for some sushi? If we all pitch in we can get some of the good stuff. They all smiled at each other again and walked to his favorite sushi bar. Hokage meeting. Konoha 1 hour after the successful genin test. All of the senseis that had already tested their students came into the room to discuss their results with their Hokage. Soon when all of the senseis were gathered they announced their results. Team 1. Failed. Team 2. Failed. Team 3. Failed. Team 4. Failed. Team 5. Failed. Team 6. Failed. Team 7. Inoku Yamanaka, Choju Akimichi, and Shiori Nara passed. Team 8. Pakura Aburam, Hibiki Izanaka, and Tajiro passed. Now it was Anko's turn. Team 9. Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma passed. Finally Hayato walked forward and said. Team 10. Mito Gecko, Niji Hyuga, and Tenten passed. Minato nodded, smiling. 4 teams had passed this year, which is one more than the usual amount of students to graduate. He also noticed that Team 9 had passed. He knew that the team had been given the bell test, and he was curious to see how they did. Thank you everyone for your hard work. I will be seeing the senseis of the past teams here tomorrow for your first D-rank assignments. I would like Anko to stay behind for a few seconds please. Everyone nodded and looked at Anko confused as they left the room. Minato picked out the files of Team 9. I wanted to hear your opinion of this team. It is rare that a bell test is passed. The bell test was notorious for having the highest number of failures. It was for this reason that it was reserved only for the team with the rookie and Kinwaichi of the year. Anko nodded yes Hokage-sama, I believe that this team can be a very strong fighting force in the future. Lee and Menma were keeping me on my toes with their taijutsu and poisons, while Yakumo kept me cornered with them. If I was high or even low I may have lost a battle, not just the bells. Minato looked a bit surprised, after all it's rare to see a genin team have so much potential. He looked at the folders and couldn't help feeling pride for Menma, but he was not sure why. He looked back at Anko and smiled. Thank you Anko-san, I will see you tomorrow to hand out your first D ranks. Anko smiled evilly and laughed. Can't wait to see the looks on the faces when they first do D ranks. She continued to chuckle evilly out the building, scaring to death the people she passed through the building. Hokage's office Konoha one day after the genin test Menma Pav. Team 9 and their sensei were waiting for their first mission as a team. They were all excited for their first mission. They were standing in front of those who gave out D and C ranked missions. They sorted through the D rank scrolls until he pulls out a mission. Team 9, the daimyo's wife's cat Tora has gone missing, it is your job to retrieve it. All of the genins on Team 9, even Lee, deadpanned the. Menma sighed, already expecting this from seeing all of the genin teams do meaningless tasks around the village. After several hours of chasing the damn cat they returned to the office, heavily wounded by the smug-looking cat in Yakumo's arms. They chuckled a little bit after they completed the mission and took a look at the remaining scrolls. The only missions we have left for the day are weeding Miss Haruka's garden, repainting an elder's house. Outside the room they could hear a commotion and a woman's voice yelling shrilly no. Tora. They sighed and caught Tora again. Team 9 sighed as one as they accepted another D rank. Training Field 9 Konoha 1 month after Team 9's first D rank. It was an entire month of hell for Team 9. In the morning they would constantly train with Anko and then do boring D rank missions for the rest of the day. It was not until after their 40th D rank mission that Anko had them gather at Training Ground 9. Anko faced her team alright, tomorrow we are going on our first C rank mission. I want all of you to get a good night's sleep tonight and be well prepared for the mission. We will probably not be back for a week or two. The 3 genins looked excited and nodded as they left to prepare for their first real mission. Menma arrived at his apartment that he had bought with his money from the D rank missions. He looked at the mirror for a bit before wiping the makeup off his cheeks, revealing 3 whisker-like marks. He did not know why he was gaining these marks. Only his sister had these marks and she was the Kyuubi container. However, until he figured out what was happening he would keep these marks hidden. He sighed, only 2 more months until the exams. He knows he can't partake in the exams. He knows that Minato would never let his daughter not partake in the first exams after she graduates. He was in luck, the next exam was in Kumo. He could make an easy argument not to take the exams this time. He also figured out that Niji's team would not participate because of the history between the Hyugas and Kumo. He smiled grimly, it was just a matter of time before he faced his sister. And at the end of it, he would be the one standing over her and gaining his revenge by humiliating that man's daughter in front of the entire world. Inside Menma's mindscape. Menma's mindscape had taken the form of a large pond surrounded by trees. In the center of the water 2 glowing red eyes appeared, slowly taking shape from the water. Finally a small fox with one tail emerged from the water and smirked, the chakra he had injected into the kid had finally managed to allow his consciousness and was finally large enough. Before he was sealed in the brat Shio he had injected some of his chakra into the other kid, Naruto. He had used that little chakra to place around anyone of his blood to ignore him. This allowed his plan to succeed. Without his consciousness in the seal, the Juubi could never be revived unless both his consciousness and chakra were in the Jito Meizo statue. It was just an added bonus that he could gain his revenge against all the years chained to a giant moon in Kushina's mindscape. He looked at his small body in disdain. He would grow fast from the excess chakra in his new host's body. However, he would not be at full strength until Naruto reaches the age of 16. He slightly regretted making the kid's life so bad, but in order to defeat Madara the deception was necessary. However, the kid had grown strong away from his parents, and with his chakra, they could train to defeat Madara, while Shio would be the bait. He knew that Naruto would be a better host because only he knew that he was the reincarnation of Asura, not Shio. He chuckled and delved back into the pond, knowing that it wasn't time to reveal himself to Naruto. No Menma yet. Chapter 5. Death of Spandex and the Butcher. Moritomo Sushi Bar Konoha 6:30 am Menma Pav. Menma was sitting with Lee and Yakumo at their favorite sushi bar as they discussed their first C rank. Menma finished a fatty tuna sashimi before he spoke. The mission will most likely be along the lines of escort or assassination. Anko already told us that's what our team was built towards. Yakumo gulped a bit. I can't believe we will really have to kill already. I know we have learned about it during the academy, but the actual knowledge that you're about to do it. It's scary. Lee nodded solemnly. Yes, it will be a harsh blow to our youthfulness, but it is required to become stronger as a ninja. Menma chewed a bit more before looking around. I wonder why our sensei called us here. Our C rank isn't for another 4 hours. Anko arrived at their booth and sat down, stealing a salmon shishim from Menma Welgaki. We are here for a very important mission that could be critical to our survival in the future. All three genins gulped a bit as they heard that. Anko suddenly tied Lee up. We are getting rid of this spandex and getting you a real ninja outfit. All of the genins and some of the other diners at the restaurant sweat dropped. Lee suddenly started stuttering BB, but Anko-sensei, Guy said that this outfit will increase my youthfulness and unlock my full potential. Anko started dragging Lee out of the restaurant, chuckling a little bit. The only thing that outfit will increase is your chances of death on an assassination mission. Menma and Yakumo quickly paid for their meal and ran after his sensei and unfortunate teammate. They found the master and unfortunate student at a popular clothing store for shinobi, where Lee was still tied up crying crocodile tears as Anko picked out an outfit. Soon she picked out an outfit and Sparta kicked Lee into the room after untying him and gave him the outfit for him to wear. Soon he came out of the dressing room and everyone gaped at Lee. He was wearing a dark green tight latex sleeveless muscle shirt with black shinobi pants, combat boots, and arm guards with latex fingerless gloves underneath. Think Lancer's clothing from Fate Zero. Anko grinned smugly as her choice in outfit was definitely the right one. Anko grabbed Lee and rushed out of the store while yelling now to the barber shop. Menma and Yakumo chased after the rapidly disappearing duo. Soon they arrived at the barber shop and entered to see Lee tied to one of the chairs and surrounded by evil chuckling barbers. Menma deadpanned at his sensei. What is going on here? Anko grinned down at Menma. Well, it seems that they have been wanting to destroy that horrid bowl cut and eyebrows of his ever since they saw him on the streets a few times. They said he was on their headhunting board and she pointed to a wall where there were a bunch of photos of different men. On top of the wall said targets. Some of the most predominantly displayed were Kakashi Haddock, Jiraiya the, and Mito Guy. Underneath Guy there was a picture of Rock Lee crossed out with a red marker. After 30 minutes a new Lee was revealed. They had trimmed his eyebrows so his eyes did not look so wide anymore. His hairstyle was now wavy in places with one strand of hair going down his forehead, Lancer's hairstyle. Both Menma and Yakumo gaped at Lee. Where had the weirdo green beast gone? Lee looked forlornly at his green spandex suit in his hands and looked at Anko-sensei. Are you sure this will allow me to become a better ninja and expand my youthfulness? Anko grinned at Lee. Sure kid, that outfit will definitely help you become a ninja. Suddenly Lee's face brightened and he shouted, yes sensei. I will become a strong ninja with this new look. If I don't I will do 1000 laps around Konoha. Menma smirked a bit. There he was. Hokage's office. Konoha Menma Pav. Team 9 were standing in front of the Hokage's desk. Minato sat behind the desk along with 2 helpers and was looking at a few scrolls in a box labeled C rank. However, before he could pull out a mission, Anko stepped forward. Hokage-sama, I would like to request a hunt. The hunt was a group of missions set aside to allow genin teams used to killing. These missions usually involve destroying bandit camps around the Land of Fire. Minato raised his eyebrows and looked over at the determined team. He saw no hesitation among the genin inside. He always hated this part of being Hokage, forcing young kids to make their first kill. He looked at Team 9. Alright then, your mission will be to destroy the bandit camp that was reported outside of the small town of Kixiang, near the border of the Land of Earth. Do not worry about Iwa Shinobi, we have a peace agreement with them, so if you encounter any they are unlikely to engage. The mission should take around 2 weeks to complete. Team 9 nodded and excited the room to prepare for their first C rank. Menma's apartment Konoha. Menma finished packing his supplies, he was bringing 2 changes of clothes, food and preservation seals, around 100 different vials of poison with labeled effects, his medical equipment, kunai, shuriken, darts, and some small arrows for his latest weapon. He rolled the sleeve of his trench coat a bit and looked at the device Anko had gifted him with. Flashback 2 weeks ago Menma Pav. Menma was practicing a water ninjutsu exercise given to them by Anko-sensei. She had tested their affinities and Lee had lightning, Yakumo had earth, and he had water. Anko had commented that despite not being able to do so, Lee could still produce natural chakra and could eventually infuse his punches and kicks with lightning chakra similar to the Reikage. Anko had Yakumo practicing some defensive earth-style ninjutsu. She had informed him that his water attacks could be a good combination with his poisons. Many poisons can become more toxic when exposed to water or evaporate in the air when upon contact with it. She had him practicing the water gunshot technique, which was the opposite of the fireball and water prison. Both were basic C-rank water ninjutsu but could be used very effectively with his poisons. However, before any of them could use the effectively they needed to train in their elements. She gave Lee a leaf and told him when it was crumpled into a small ball, he would be given the next step. Yakumo had to turn her leaf completely into ash, well he had to extract all of the water from the leaf. He was around the midway point of extracting the water before the leaf crumpled, proof that he messed up again. He sighed and looked up as Anko walked up to them carrying 3 scrolls. Team 9 stopped their training exercise and approached Anko. Sensei gave 1 scroll to each of us and explained Welgaki's good news. Your wonderful and sexy sensei has decided to gift all of you with a weapon. For Lee I asked Guy to give you one of their nunchucks. Lee's eyes widened, the Mito family was famous for their nunchuck wielders. It was said that Mito Bruce was able to go head to head with the second Hokage with nothing but a pair of his nunchucks. Lee unsealed the 2 nunchucks and spun them around a bit before grinning widely. For Yakumo, this is a joint project between Menma and I. She unsealed a tanto and handed it to Yakumo. This dagger is imbued with a mix of several different poisons that will kill a grown man in around a minute with a scratch. And finally for Menma. She unsealed a very odd crossbow. It was small and attached to a fingerless glove. The glove seemed to have a reloading device that would automatically reload the crossbow. Anko grinned a bit. This little beauty is an item I found a few years ago at a random shop in the land of snow. The bolts loaded into it are unpoisoned, but she handed him a quiver of small arrows. You can poison whatever you want on these which you can load manually. Menma nodded and put on the contraption. He looked around and noticed a target a few meters away. He pointed the arm-mounted crossbow and fired rapidly at the target, each hitting in the inner circle. He gave a small smile and thanked his sensei. Thanks sensei, this is great. Anko saw the small smile and smirked, it was hard to get that kid to smile. Then flashback. At 1 p.m. all the members of Team 9 arrived at the gate and greeted each other. Soon their sensei arrived and they jumped into the forest at high speeds, each mentally preparing for what they're about to do. Forest surrounding Qixiang. 12 p.m. Northern Land of Fire. 3 days since Team 9 set out from Konoha and Mapav. Team 9 was hiding in the trees looking over the bandit camp. The camp was hidden in a clearing surrounded by trees north of Qixiang. They were discussing their plan to wipe out the bandits. Anko began to tell them the plan. Alright, I want Yakumo to maintain a circle around the camp to prevent their escape and to remain undetected. Menma, spread your poison gas around the camp. Lee, when Yakumo and Menma complete their tasks I want you to go in and start killing the guards. Then we will all enter at the 3 entrances to the camp to kill the rest of the bandits. Everyone nodded. Yakumo's pav. I got into position at the east entrance and quickly began to go through some hand seals and whispered the Temple of Nirvana. Soon all of the guards around the camp saw feathers in front of their eyes and fell asleep. Menma Pav. He crouched upon the largest tree at the southern entrance and manually inserted a syringe into his crossbow and fired them to critical spots around the bandit camp. Soon the camp was littered with syringes. Lee's Pav. Lee arrived at the west entrance to the bandit camp and took out his nunchucks and breathed deeply before activating a seal on his tongue to filter out the air from the poison. Anko's Pav. She stood silently away from the camp observing their progress and was impressed. These guys were doing pretty well on their first time. She frowned and looked a bit to the north. Her snakes had picked up a large man approaching the camp they were about to attack and she was worried. Menma's Pav. Menma formed a hand seal and whispered Katsu. And all of the syringes he launched into the camp exploded with a noxious purple gas throughout the camp. He quickly put on his gas mask before running into the camp to help Lee, who was already battling some of the coughing bandits. He rolled under a wild swing by a bandit and shot him with a crossbow bolt before peppering the bandits around Lee with arrows. Not to waste arrows he quickly activated his chakra scalpels and started to kill more bandits. Lee's pav. Spinning his nunchucks around at startling speeds, he broke bones and necks of bandits around him as he entered the camp like a whirlwind, striking at any bandit he could see and avoiding any of the wild strikes of the bandits, coughing from the poison in the air. Ikumo pav. Grabbing the tanto from the sheath on her left shoulder, she quickly entered the camp, cutting any bandit that got too close to her as she started to seal any supplies and stolen goods the bandits had. She would return all of the stolen items to the village after this was over. Menma pav. Soon no bandits remained and bodies were littered around the camp. He closed his eyes a bit as he heard Lee and Yakumo throw up in the forest after their first skills. He knew he should feel worse about killing for the first time. But a part of his humanity died a long time ago when he first picked up Orochimaru's journal. He wished he felt worse about killing the bandits. But all he felt inside was a hollowness that he couldn't describe. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he flinched before opening his eyes and saw Anko with a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, Menma?" In the back of his mind he realized this was the first time she had called him by his name instead of Brad or Gaki. He nodded slowly. "I will be fine. It will just take a bit to get used to." Anko nodded, understanding. However, before they could leave back to Konoha, Anko suddenly grabbed us and Sushin out of the way as one of the largest men that he had ever seen slammed a huge mace on the ground, cracking it heavily and kicking up a bunch of dust. When the dust settled, the man was revealed to Team 9. He was a giant of a man at 7 feet tall and was heavily muscled. He had scraggly dark brown hair and a large beard. He carried a large two-handed mace with an anvil-sized head. On his forehead was the symbol of Iwa with a slash crossing it. He chuckled deeply at their ready stances. "So 4 tree huggers think they can beat me?" Anko narrowed her eyes to Rogan the Butcher, a rank missing nin known for slaughtering entire towns in the Land of Fire during the last war. Went rogue a couple of years ago since the Tsuchikage signed the peace treaty. "What are you doing in this area?" Behind her back she made a few hand signs to her team. Rogan grinned darkly. "I was just about to have fun in the town nearby. I heard there was a bunch of scum living there and I wanted to clean it up. But here I am with a bunch of newborn genin ninjas and a whore Konoha Kunoichi. This will be fun." With those words he lifted his mace and quickly swung it at me. I jumped away from the mace, firing bolts from my crossbow at high speed, but most of the arrows were deflected as he spun his mace around. We all charged at Rogan, but he simply grinned again and started spinning around with his mace, forcing us all to get back before we were clubbed. He stopped spinning suddenly and kicked Yakumo away from him into the woods harshly. Lee yelled at Yakumo. Before having to dodge a fast swing by Rogan, but ended up getting backhanded by him straight into a tree and was knocked out. I quickly went through some hand seals and used one of the few ninjutsu he learned from Orochimaru's notes. He cupped his hands together and converted some of his chakra into poison, and a small black ball appeared between his hands, and he shouted "Dakijin no." And a large blast of black smoke appeared from his hand straight at the butcher. Rogan saw the cloud and quickly went through some hand seals and clapped his hands together. A wall of earth separated him from the poison cloud. As the cloud hit the wall started to dissolve. Rogan quickly charged at Menma with his anvil. Menma activated his chakra scalpels, and Anko drew 2 longer than normal kunai, and they engaged him into jutsu. They were locked in combat for around 2 minutes before Rogan slammed the handle of his mace into Anko's stomach before knocking her out with another hit from his mace. Seeing his sensei fall made something snap inside of Menma. He unsealed a syringe from a seal on his wrist and injected it into his arm. Rogan was confused as Menma injected something into himself. Time seemed to slow and all Menma could hear was a heartbeat steadily speeding up. He started frothing at the mouth a bit and his eyes turned pure white. Rogan looked a bit alarmed at this development and charged at Menma, preparing to strike him down before he finished whatever he was doing. However, as he struck the genin, his mace hit blackened skin and his mace was stopped dead. Soon this darkness was spreading all across Menma until he was completely covered except his eyes, and a jagged smile played across the thing's mouth. The poison that he injected himself with was one of Orochimaru's more brilliant creations. He took the venom of the Chakra Eater. A special type of mosquito that injects its poison into its victim that absorbs its chakra. He took a syringe full of it and injected it with the chakra of several bestial creatures from the Forest of Death. He also mixed it with the venom of the fossilized snake, a snake that hardens the chakra system with its venom when it bites an opponent. When injected into a human, the results are what is displayed. The venom causes chakra to harden in the chakra pathways and allows the human body to become invulnerable and have the senses and fighting instinct of a predator. In exchange, one has no control over their body until the effect wears off. Rogan was hard-pressed to do anything against the Menma as he constantly guarded the clawed attacks of Menma. Soon several cuts and scrapes dotted the butcher. Menma fought like a beast, constantly scratching, cutting, and biting at Rogan until eventually the man's mace missed and he cut the missing in's throat open. Rogan spluttered a bit and died, looking at the roaring and victory face of his killer. Soon the effects of the enhancer wore off and Menma fell to the ground, exhausted. He looked at his skin and noticed it was not purple. He had read that a side effect of the enhancer was that the last test subject, some guy called Mundo, was purple for a month after the poison was injected into him. He looked at his sensei and crawled to her, and his hands started to glow green. He healed her to the best of his ability, then passed out from chakra exhaustion. Inside Menma's mindscape, Ayubi looked through Menma's eyes as he fought Rogan. He was impressed despite himself as he saw the boy fight A. As a reward for the kid, he decided to use a little of his corrosive chakra to prevent any negative side effects of the stuff he injected himself with. He looked around the pond a bit and looked at an hourglass on the shore of the lake. His illusion over the Namikaze family would not last for much longer than a year. He sighed a bit and prepared to meet his new container at the end of the year. He hoped the kid would forgive him for his deception. Chapter 6. The Truth and the Summoning Contract. Xiang Land of Fire. One day after the battle, Menma Pav. It was a bright morning when Menma slowly opened his eyes. He winced at the bright light hitting his eyes from the window as he sat up in bed, warily looking around him. He was in a modest but comfortable hotel room. Soon after he woke up, Anko entered the room with a tray of breakfast. He saw the food and his stomach growled. He realized he was very hungry. Anko sat down near him and he asked, while eating his eggs, what happened? Are Yakumo and Lee alright? Anko nodded. Yes, Yakumo was lucky, she fell into some mud and it cushioned her fall a bit. As for Lee, he woke up a few hours before you did. Seeing how he is currently running around the village, he appears to be fine. I woke up around 30 minutes of being unconscious. You shouldn't use your chakra so recklessly to heal me, brat. You were suffering from severe chakra exhaustion. I'm surprised you're up already. But. Anko suddenly turns deadly serious, making Menma gulp a bit. What the hell was that poison you took? I found the needle sticking out of your arm and found Rogan looking as if an animal attacked him. Menma looked away from Anko. It was a steroid that I created. Anko looked a bit angry. Bullshit, I know what we have worked on together, and that steroid was a way to advance for a rookie genin, to completely demolish one of the highest ranked A rank missing nin in the bingo book. The only reason that man was not S rank is because he is only wanted in Konoha and Iowa. A little known fact about becoming S rank in the bingo book is that you need to be wanted at A rank by 3 different ninja villages. Menma sighed a bit, contemplating what to do. He knew this may make her hate him, but he owed her the truth. He unzipped his trench coat and pulled down his shirt to show a seal on his heart and unsealed Orochimaru's journal. He handed it to Anko. Anko took the journal and started flipping through it, getting angrier as she continued to read the experiments that her former mentor conducted. She looked up, more angry than he had ever seen her. What the hell, Gaki, where did you find this? This is one of Orochimaru's personal journals. Menma winced a bit at her tone. When I was locked out of the Namikaze estate, I found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories near a training ground I used. I had just decided to get revenge on my former family, but I had no one to train me. I had no resources, no mentor and no allies, so I decided to learn from his journals. Anko's angry expression softened a bit. Menma, you can't just live your life for revenge. I have seen people, including my former mentor, walk that path. All of them either ended up dead or a worse monster than the person they wished revenge on. Anko hugged Menma as a mother would. Menma. No, Naruto, you do not need to become a monster like my former sensei. A good friend of mine once told me that in order to become truly strong, you need something precious to fight for. Revenge isn't something precious to you. It is just an empty emotion of hatred that will continue to corrupt you. When your revenge is complete, you're left with nothing but more hatred. Mentally, she was thanking the third Hokage for telling her this after she was abandoned by Orochimaru, or she would have no clue what to say to this kid. For the first time since he was 5, Naruto felt tears running down his face as he was hugged for the first time in his memory. He thought back to all the times he was forgotten by his family and how they doted on Shio. He still felt the burning hatred for his former family. But he then thought of Lee, Yakumo, and Anko, and he felt happy for the first time in a long time. He smiled, a true warm smile. He would be the best of both worlds. He would prove to his former family that he was better than Shio, but he would not do it Orochimaru's way. He would become powerful and protect his precious people. He wrapped his arms around Anko and said softly, "Thank you, Kasan." Anko smiled a bit. No problem, brat. Exit of Xiang Land of Fire. Menma's Pav. Team 9 was preparing to leave Xiang when 4 Iowa shinobi jumped down in front of them. Team 9 quickly got into fighting stances, but the leader raised his hand. Hold, we are not here to fight. Anko didn't loosen her guard and spoke, what are you doing here then? The leader of the Iowa group stepped forward a bit. He was a tall man with a rather large nose. He was dressed in the formal Iowa outfit. He stopped a good distance from their group. My name is Katsuchi of Awagakure with my genin team, Kuritsuchi, Akatsuchi, and Suzumabachi Kamizuro. We had heard that Rogan the Butcher was in the area and came to take him out, but it seems that we were too late. Anko nodded and relaxed a bit. Yes, my genin team and I defeated Rogan. Itsuchi looked a little impressed as he observed the three genin. Yes, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Iwa for his death, however, we would like to request that you return the hammer of the first Tsuchikage to us. Rogan had stolen it before he went rogue. Anko looked surprised at the hammer of the first the Diamondum. We did not know that he was carrying such a renowned weapon, I would have thought he would have used some of its abilities. Itsuchi nodded. The hammer has seals to prevent the unworthy of using it. You may keep the body of Rogan, he is rightfully yours to cash in the bounty. Anko took out the scroll they had sealed the hammer in and handed it to Kitsuchi. The Iwa unsealed the mace and inspected it a bit before nodding and sealing it back into the scroll. He looked at the group that Tsuchikage will hear of this. It will definitely help ease some of the tensions after the peace treaty to hear that a Konoha team returned one of our greatest relics of the first Tsuchikage. Anko nodded. The Iwa team departed, but Menma noticed the girl Kuritsuchi look at him speculatively before jumping away with the rest of her team. Anko sighed in relief that it was Kitsuchi the Great Earth Shaker. He is an S-class ninja of Iwa and slated to become the next Tsuchikage. During the last war he was famous for remodeling an entire forest into an earthen terrain for his allies. We were lucky they weren't hostile or we would have stood no chance. The genins shivered, for their usually unflappable sensei to be wary spoke volumes of that man's skill. Menma looked at the sun which was approaching noon. Well, we need to report this to the Hokage, so let's head back as quickly as possible. Everyone nodded and they jumped into the forest heading at full speed back to Konoha. Hokage's office Konoha 3 days after the events at Kixiang Minato's POV. Minato deadpanned at the report in his hands. How did a C rank turn into an encounter with a high A rank missing 9 and then an encounter with the S-class Iwa Kitsuchi? He sighed. Well, I am glad that no one was injured during this mission. I am also proud that you three defeated Rogan the Butcher, the bounty on his head will be split among the 4 of you. He smiled a bit. I also want to thank you for returning that weapon back to Iowa. I have already been sent a message from the Tsuchikage with a thank you and the information that he is sending a genin team to the next Chunin exams in Konoha. This is the first time Iowa has participated in an exam sponsored by the village since the system was made. Anko grinned all in a day's work Hokage-sama. He died at the Jonin sensei. I hope it isn't a daily thing, you were very lucky this time. However, due to the unforeseen variables in this mission I bumped it up to A rank and you will earn the appropriate pay alongside the bounty of Rogan. Congratulations. Ikumo and Lee cheered while Menma smirked, the pay of an A rank mission would cover his living expenses for the next year. Konoha Street 6 months later Menma's POV. The information that a genin team had killed the infamous Rogan the Butcher spread like wildfire throughout the village. Rogan was one of the most hated Iwa shinobi from the last war. To hear that a genin team managed to kill him made them pretty well known throughout the village. Soon they got into the habit of training with Anko, doing some D ranks and the occasional C rank. However, none of their C ranks were as exciting as their first one. They had skipped the Chunin exams in Kumo along with Team 10. They heard that Team 7 and 8 disbanded due to 2 deaths and some promotions, leaving the spots open for this year's graduating class. Currently he was spying on this year's graduating class. He wanted to scout out the competition and potential allies of the next generation. He also wanted to see the progress of his former sister. He noticed a few potential threats in the class. Uchiha Sasuke was the shinobi of the year at the moment, while his sister, Uzumaki Namikaze Shio, was the rookie in Kinwaichi of the year. The dead last of their generation was an Inuyasha member named Kiba, the younger brother to the clan heiress. The day for their class it seemed as if they were demonstrating ninjutsu. Sasuke did a fireball, as expected of an Uchiha member, it was their calling card after all. Kiba did his clan fang over fang. Most of the academy students did simple hinges or no. When it was finally Shio's turn she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb and yelled Kuchius no jutsu. And she appeared standing on a large frog. He froze, staring at the sight of the frog. He had known that Shio would eventually summon frogs. But he had figured that she would not be given the contract until she was at least. He frowned angrily, he could not beat his sister if she had an entire clan of toads to back her up. Minato had held down the Kyuubi with the boss summon of the Toad clan, he would stand no chance. He dashed to his hidden training grounds thinking deeply. He needed a summoning contract, that was for sure. However, the only contracts that he knew of in Konoha were the Nara clan's deer summoning contract, the Akimichi's butterfly contract, the tortoise contract of the Mito clan, and the toad contract belonging to his former family and Jiraiya of the Sannin. He frowned again, trying to summon without a contract is incredibly dangerous. However, if one manages to gain a summoning contract through this method they are bound to get stronger. Many famous shinobi who had passed the test of their most naturally aligned clans became extremely famous ninjas. The best examples of this would be the three, each now S-rank ninja. He knew he would not stand a chance against the Toad clan, even if he was more powerful than their summoner. Feeling a steely resolve to settle over him, he left to find his sensei. Anko's apartment. Knocking on the door, Menma waited for Anko. His sensei opened the door and looked at him annoyed. "What do you want, Gaki? There is no training for this week." He nodded. "I know, sensei. I just wanted to inform you I am going to do some solo survival training in the Forest of Death for the next week, and I will not be in contact." Anko nodded. "Be careful, Gaki, the tigers are a bit frisky since it's close to mating season." Menma nodded before running to the forest. When he was far enough in, he breathed in a bit to calm himself. Summoning without a contract is not illegal, but he would be the first unsponsored orphan to attempt this. All of the past people to summon animals without a contract either had special training from a clan or a high ranking. He went through the hand seals he had memorized from Shio and bit his thumb before saying quietly no. With it, he disappeared in a plume of smoke. Unknown forest. Menma Pav. Menma crouched down on the ground as he arrived, looking around the area cautiously. The area he had landed on seemed to be pretty similar to the Forest of Death. He assumed he had summoned himself into a land creature's domain, so that removed sea creatures or any type of bird. The area also did not look like a swamp, so that removed reptiles. He looked around a bit more, expecting to see some overly large animal appear from the forest, but he could see nothing. What he did not know is that he is being watched at the moment. All around the forest, tiny eyes peered at him as they considered the latest potential summoner. They had not had a potential contract holder for centuries. Menma continued to walk down the only path in the forest. He still did not see any potential summoning animals. He saw several insects, small animals, but none that seemed to be summonable. He pulled his larger crossbow from his back. He had bought this weapon from the latest shipment of weapons from the land of snow. The weapon ran on chakra and could reload arrows extremely quickly. He had made the weapon even more deadly by poisoning all of the arrows. Eventually he reached a clearing with an extremely large spider web. The web was constructed to look like a small city and was crawling with hundreds upon hundreds of spiders in different sizes. Some were as large as trucks while others the size of his fingernail. He put on his gas mask and cautiously approached the nest, wary of any potential attack. As he passed, many of the spiders turned to look at him curiously, or at least he thought it was curiously. It was hard to tell their emotions. Soon he arrived at the center of the nest where a large throne was erected. He was confused. Why would a throne be here that was meant for a humanoid person? Before he could walk further, hundreds of spiders converged on the throne, seemingly merging into a human. Soon the blob of spiders gained color and the person was revealed. She was a tall woman with flowing black hair, eyes that instead of a pupil had a classic spider web pattern. She wore a black dress with spider web pattern straps, a Ratchan Soul Eater. The lady smiled motherly at Menma and put a black fan in front of her mouth as she spoke. "It has been so long since a human has entered this realm. We have been waiting so long for a true summoner of our race." He stared at the being in front of him. "Who are you? I doubt you are human if you are here." The women didn't seem offended. "No, I am not. My name is Arachne, the collective consciousness of all the spiders of this realm." He felt his eyes widened. "So you are the hive mind of all of these spiders?" Arachne nodded yes, only a few of the spiders here have true awareness like other summoning creatures. However, an advantage of this is that I can control any spider, not only of this realm. For example, I know that your family abandoned you. I know where each member of your family is. I even know that your mentor, Anko, burned her dinner last night and was forced to eat out." He gaped at such an information gathering ability. If what she was saying is true, she had the power to see through the eyes of every spider on Earth. That would outstrip any sensing ability he had ever heard of from anyone. He gulped a bit before becoming serious. "What is your challenge to becoming a summoner of the Spider Clan?" The woman tapped her chin and thought. The Spider Clan had never had a test for their summoner because no one had ever wanted her contract. She looked at the young man before her. She knew everything about him that she saw through her spiders. She knew he was a driven young man that would become very powerful in the future. She licked her lips a bit and said, "I know almost your entire life, Menma, or should I say Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I know how powerful you can be in the future. Your fighting style is very similar to ours as well. I will give you the summoning contract." I wanted to gape at how easy that was, but I retained control over my emotions this time. "I thank Queen Arach. Could you please explain the abilities of your contract?" Arach nodded. "The spider contract is not one of the most powerful contracts in terms of open combat, but in terms of subversion, intelligence gathering, and assassination we are unparalleled. We are able to locate and listen to any conversation where a spider can access. Finally, we can teach you our brand of Senjutsu." I couldn't help but widen my eyes at the last bit of information. Senjutsu was only from the most rare of contracts. Each clan had their own brand of Senjutsu. From what he read from Minato's notes is that the Toad clan boosts one's abilities by a factor of 10. He looked at Irachi seriously. What is the purpose of your senjutsu? Irachi smiled her motherly smile and explained our last summoner, Elise, was able to turn into a rather impressively large black widow spider. She gained the ability to access the collective consciousness of the spiders like I am able to. Finally, she gained the ability to use acid-based attacks. I believe she called it acid release. He thought of the possibilities of those powers. Being able to turn into a large spider would be extremely useful in combat. By entering the consciousness of every spider, his sensory ability would be unparalleled. However, the acid release drew his attention the most. That ability would go perfectly with his fighting style. He looked at Irachi. How does one learn your style of senjutsu? Irachi frowned a bit. Other clans require you to absorb the errant nature chakra in the air. We use a special type of toxin to give you our abilities. However, this toxin is extremely deadly and requires thorough training in resisting poisons. He smirked a bit at how I have trained myself for 6 years in resisting poisons. I will be able to handle it. Irachi smirked a bit. What a convenient summoner. Elise required years of poison resistance training before she was able to undergo the Villamot toxin. She took out an ancient-looking vial from a spider and approached Menma. She cut herself with a knife and black blood flowed into a wooden goblet, filling it halfway. She then poured the crystal-clear concoction from the vial into the cup, filling it to nearly the brim. She handed the cup to Menma and spoke seriously. This will hurt you more than anything that has happened in your life. It will feel as if every cell in your body is melting and every nerve cell will hurt horribly. We will wrap you in one of our healing cocoons until the process is complete. The Villamot toxin will take 3 days to fully integrate with your body. After that, if you live, it will take around a week for you to heal. Menma nodded and mentally prepared himself as he drank deeply from the goblet. As soon as he finished the drink, spiders immediately started wrapping him in a cocoon. He barely acknowledged the spider silk around him as he felt an enormous amount of pain spreading through his body. The pain was worse than the time he overdosed on black widow venom to immunize himself. As he started to pass out, he thought of his friends, Lee's encouraging thumbs up and a sunny smile. Mikumo's soft smile, hands clasped behind her back as she encouraged him on. Anko's smirk as she told him to survive or she would find a way to make his afterlife hell. He smiled a bit in the cocoon. The pain seemed to dull a bit as he continued to think of his friends' encouragement. His precious people were waiting for him to return. Yeah. He would not die here. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next part of this series, make sure to turn on the bell notification so you don't miss it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Also, feel free to check out the other videos I've created. I'm sure you'll enjoy them too. See you guys in the next video.